I wanted to share something that I found yesterday, and Brenda just walked right into this trap. It's from the Get Abstract Compressed Knowledge. And the statement in the paint of this site says, remember what Brenda said about us going down to the State House. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And I actually was thinking about Brenda when I became. Greetings. Greetings to the staff and those who are making this function happen. I know, and we all up here know, it doesn't just drop in. So we are thanking you all for all of that. It's a pleasure to be here. The last 3 years, I've had 3 meetings on the day that this meeting was, and I would come to this for a little bit and go to 2 other meetings and then fly home for other meetings. It's good to see everybody, and what's really particularly good to see is I think I see some students out there. If you're a student, raise your hand. All right. That guarantees us that there'll be somebody on this platform when we can't raise our feet to get up here anymore. And there are days like that. I'm a retiree. I'm doing everything that I wanted to do that I couldn't do when I was working. I have 2 new knees, so my knees may be newer than some of yours. Although I'm guessing from the orthopedics report that many of you have been the same route. I teach Berry PRN from the hospital that I retired from. And then a friend said, oh, come over here. And I'm now the School of Nursing lab coordinator at Ivy Tech with the high fidelity mannequins and everything that goes with that, and simulation. And I've adjuncted for those who've asked me in the various departments, and it's just been fun, a lot of fun. Oh, and one of the other things I do is I volunteer for hospice, and I'm now about halfway through an MSN in nursing education online. I thought I would never be able to do that. I know my class very well, but I could pass on the street and wouldn't know their faces because we've never seen each other. My goal is, with that degree, to be able to fill some of the gaps in the faculty needs. And I'm 5 minutes from my home, so can't get any better than that. I travel to visit my family in various states, and I have an important church family in Lafayette. When they said, we want you to come speak about the time you were president, I thought, I can't remember where my car keys are sometimes, let alone what I did in 85 and 87. So I went to the office. And they've sent me several things, and I did a cursory look at it, and it's kind of like you sit down and you pick up an old photo album and you go, oh, I remember this. Oh, I remember this, and before you know it, you've spent 4 hours sitting on the floor looking at photo albums. Well, I didn't bring a photo album with me, but I wanted to start with a document that I found in some of our literature, and I want to share it with everybody. So if I need 2 students, I see 2 right in front here. If you'll come up here, Barbara has something for you to pass out to everybody. There will be a test, so you, oh yes, give some to the folks up here.
Is this part of your MSN program?
There's a project in this course that is the data for, I'm sure.
Students, there will be a test, so be sure you pay attention. When I found this document, I thought, what does that go with? Couldn't figure out. It was in between a bunch of stuff about insulation for the roof and new screen doors. And I couldn't figure out why it was there. I think it goes back to what one of our speakers talked about, and that was continuing education needing to justify why they were a part of us and why we wanted to continue to do that. It was a philosophy, and if you look at the bottom, you can see it was written by the ISNA Council on Continuing Education. But I think it's very germane for what we're all about and why we're here today. And that is that this philosophy talks about personal responsibility. Do not expect your company to buy your membership to this organization or any others. If they want to, that's fine, but don't expect it. You have a personal responsibility for that. That nursing is also an essential service, and our organization is to facilitate professional growth. You can see how continuing ed was working into that. And that nurses benefit from an organization. That is absolutely true, absolutely true. And that professional growth contributes to the advancement of the nursing profession. And I wanted to share this. There's really not going to be a test. I was just kidding. I wanted to share this because I believe that this says a lot about who we are and what we're about. And my hope is that you as students will inculcate this into your thinking. Obviously, we're not the only nursing organization, but we are the only nursing organization that stands for all nurses. We are here for all of nursing. And I can tell you that doesn't mean that everybody's going to agree with everything that we decide to do. But there certainly was agreement when we were talking about our license. So I think this philosophy is a really important, even though it was accepted back in 1984, is very important for us to consider a part of what we are today. The American Association of the Colleges of Nursing in 2008 described in the essentials for a baccalaureate professional nursing education graduate the requirements for leadership skill in the following areas: the role of being a patient advocate, inter and intra-professional communication. Are any of you students sitting with other professions as you're learning? I know that that's happening in many places. Physicians and nurses are learning together. I'm hoping that we're a team someday sitting at the same table and nobody's standing up to let somebody else sit down. That we participate, the other one of the skills is participate as nursing professional in a political process and legislation. And you may be thinking, I'm never going to do that, never going to do that. Well, that was my thought until Brenda said, they're going to take away our license. We need to do something about that. So we dragged a lot of people from Lafayette and a bunch of people from everywhere. And the autonomy of the nursing role. You may not feel real autonomous as a student now, but believe you me, when you graduate and you're the one in charge, you are very autonomous and very alone. Then the scope of practice for the academic nurses, NLN, the revision in 2012, describes in the Competency 5 functions as a change agent and a leader for an educator, and those roles are provide leadership at work and in other organization, and you develop leadership skills to shape and implement change. The only change that occurs is the change that we make happen. Did you hear that? That we make happen. If you're not sure about that, take a look at the Institute of Medicine report for 2011, The Future of Nursing, Leading Change, Advancing Healthcare. And I quote from there, nurses should be full partners with physicians and other healthcare professionals in redesigning healthcare in the United States. Students, this is where you can learn and where you can and be that leader. This is where you can indeed learn to be that full partner. You need to be an active part of that redesign, and we're sitting up here wondering what it's going to look like. And I'm hoping that that's starting in your brain right now. So what were some of the events that happened when I was president? Well, in our first board meeting, I got to tell you a funny story. When the new president is coming on, the previous president, and that would have been Nadine for me, we sit down and talk about this is how it goes. And so I had teenagers at that point, a busy job, and I hurried up to get, and I think it was at Maribel, but we're not sure. We can't quite remember. But we were sitting down talking in a hotel room, and I was sitting there listening very closely to her, and all of a sudden I was asleep. Nadine was still talking.
I wasn't going to tell that story. I don't think that was the only time.
And now it happens a little more often. There must be a button back here. When you sit down, you go to sleep. But anyhow, I woke up and she was still talking. And the transition occurred no matter what the situation. So we had the board meeting in October at Maribel. No, it was Indianapolis, I think. And then December, there was a leadership retreat. So if you are feeling that, I really don't know that leadership role very well, come. There will be an opportunity for you to learn that. We decided at that meeting about a lot of repairs that needed to happen, upkeep, and remodeling. How interesting. That was our new building. We needed to do some remodeling. And then in February of the following year, Eunice Cole was the ANA president at that point. And I believe, if I remember correctly, Eunice is from Chicago, or was from Chicago. There were a lot of proposals that we looked at. ANA was proposing to stagger the terms of office and limit the number of years that people could serve on the board at ANA, and that was 9 years. Can you imagine a 9-year term? The Indiana Legislative Committee at that point was talking about third-year party reimbursement. And interesting, just taking us back to that year, Carolyn Tungate was an ISNA representative to the Indiana State Board of Health for a monthly AIDS advocacy meeting. Monthly meeting. It wasn't something once a year, it was a monthly meeting. Now remember that we didn't have computers just yet. And all of the minutes that I read were typed on a typewriter. The task force for entry level had not given us any report at that point. In April, there was generally a lot of general stuff. When you have a responsibility for leadership, you cover a lot of general stuff and keep the business going. In August, again, a lot of general stuff, but listen to this. An invitation from the Indiana State Medical Association to join them in a coalition to promote tobacco-free society by 2000. Can you imagine? It happened that long ago. We did join with them in that process. We discussed changing conditions that affect the ISNA at-risk possibilities. So it was a time where there was a lot of concern about what could happen to those who were sitting on boards and who were officers. So, and preliminary plans for the 87 convention occurred at that point. In September, guess what? Remodeling was done. And we were in a brand new room with pink chairs and a lot of gray, and it was beautiful. And we spent a lot of time thanking Maggie Fuller for sharing her expertise in the working with the decorator in that situation. At that point, peer review and assistance was a big issue everywhere, and Channel 8 came to interview them and to talk about what that was all about. We were invited by the Indiana State Medical Association to be a part of PADS at that point. A draft of the scope of practice was received from ANA, and we had that to work with along with our other pieces. In February of '87, my second year, Margreta Stiles was the president of ANA, and computer ballots were used for the first time for ISNA. The scope of practice statement was presented, and the vote failed. Was presented, and the vote failed. They went to revise it because there were many revisions that were suggested, and it was to be presented again in a revised format. We agreed to support those of you from Indiana State University to to support you in a grant for the MSN program to get started at Indiana State. Some of you may remember that very vividly. The changes that occurred at the State Board of Health, or the State Board of Nursing at this point, began with the continuing education role of the consultant. The person left that position, and they were really not wanting to refill it, and things have changed a lot since then. In July, our membership at that point was 1,797 members. I don't know where we are now, but that's where we were then. There were many other things that occurred, but the most important probably in that spring was that we bought our first computers and all the equipment that went with it, and it cost $9,000. We also bought an alarm system at the same time for the building, and everybody got assigned to, it'll be your turn to go when the alarm goes off. And we involved a lot of people in that. Most of us didn't live nearby, so it was a lot of the staff that was involved with that. Nadine Coudray came to us asking for $250 for an optical scanner for the ISNA Data Task Force, with the intent to be able to gather some of that data. I knew from our discussion, I was awake when she talked about the data, and she said that that was one of the most important jobs that needed to be an ongoing piece. And I was happy to see her with the ability maybe at that point to be able to do some of those things. A new fee schedule happened from the CE Task Force. In May, there was a career exploration published by the Girl Scouts of America that portrayed the nursing profession in a not too favorable light. And so we made it known that that was not appropriate. At that point, the billing system was changing, and Ernie went to Kansas for a meeting that was, well, it just wasn't his favorite thing. And how the system occurred was not our favorite thing. And then it was ANA's billing, and it was going to change a number of things. And then we got, not very long after that, from the ANA board that they were proposing a $29 increase in fees. And we voted to not support that. And in October, we made a change to the next president, who is